Welcome, dear friend, to this sacred space where time slows and hearts find rest. If you've arrived here tonight, it's likely because your soul is seeking something deeper than what the rushing world offers. Perhaps you've carried the weight of today's worries, tomorrow's uncertainties, or the lingering echoes of decisions that pull at your peace. You are not alone in this seeking, and you are so very welcome here. Take a moment now to settle into whatever space holds you tonight. Whether you're lying beneath familiar covers, resting in a chair that knows the shape of your weary frame, or finding refuge wherever you can claim a moment of stillness, let this be your sanctuary. Feel the surface beneath you accepting your full weight, supporting you completely. There's nothing you need to prove here, nothing you need to accomplish. This is simply time to receive. Let's begin by allowing your breath to find its natural rhythm. Don't force anything. Just notice how the air moves in and out of your body like a gentle tide. With each exhale, imagine releasing the tension you've been carrying in your shoulders, the furrow in your brow, the tight grip your hands may have held throughout the day. Your breath is a gift that requires no effort, a reminder that you are held and sustained by love itself. Tonight, we're going to journey together into a story that has brought comfort to countless souls across centuries. It's the story of a man who walked the dusty roads of ancient Palestine with such love that it changed the very fabric of human hope. But before we step into those ancient lands, I want you to know that you're joining a beautiful community of seekers, fellow travelers who have found solace in these sacred hours before sleep. Some of you have walked with us through many such journeys, and your faithfulness is a blessing that touches my heart deeply. Others are discovering this peaceful refuge for the first time, and how wonderful that your steps have led you here tonight. Whether you're returning or newly arrived, you belong in this circle of those who seek the deep peace that passes understanding. Feel yourself sinking deeper now, as if you're settling into the very arms of grace itself. The world outside, with its urgent demands and endless notifications, is growing distant. The screens that have claimed so much of your attention today are now dark and silent. Even the thoughts that usually race through your mind like busy traffic are beginning to slow, finding their way to side roads where they can rest until morning. In this gentle transition from the concerns of today into the embrace of sacred story, allow yourself to imagine stepping through a doorway that leads from your current time and place into something timeless. With each breath, you're moving further from the anxieties that have followed you here and closer to a peace that has been waiting patiently for your arrival. Picture yourself as a traveler who has been walking a long road, and ahead you see the warm glow of light spilling from windows that promise rest and refuge. This is where our story begins tonight, in the recognition that every human heart longs for home, for a place where we are known completely and loved unconditionally. Jesus understood this longing because he lived it, walked among people who carried it, and offered his very life as the answer to humanity's deepest need for belonging. As we prepare to enter his world, let your breathing become even more relaxed. Each exhale a small surrender, each inhale a gentle receiving. The night air around you is soft and welcoming, and you are exactly where you need to be. Your journey toward rest has begun, and the story that awaits will carry you gently into the deepest peace your soul has been seeking. Chapter 2: Journey into Sacred Lands. As your breathing settles into its peaceful rhythm, imagine now that you're stepping from your familiar world into an ancient landscape where every stone has witnessed miracles, where every pathway has felt the footsteps of the divine. The transition is gentle, like walking from a well-lit room into the soft glow of candlelight, where everything becomes more intimate, more sacred, more alive with possibility. The air here is different, tinged with the scent of olive trees and wild herbs that grow along rocky hillsides. There's a warmth to this place that goes beyond temperature, a sense that the very earth holds memories of profound love. You find yourself on a dusty road that winds through rolling hills dotted with small villages, their white stone houses glowing golden in the eternal light of late afternoon that, seems to linger here in this place outside of ordinary time. This is Palestine in the 1st century, a land bridge between great empires, a crossroads where Roman soldiers march alongside Jewish pilgrims, where merchants from distant lands speak in tongues unknown while trading in the common currencies of human need and hope. It's a place of contrasts, where the wealthy recline on couches inlaid with ivory while beggars sit at their gates, where learned scribes debate fine points of law while children play in the dust of streets that have no names. Feel the warmth of sun-baked earth beneath your feet as you walk these ancient paths. The sandals you wear are simple leather, secured with worn straps that have carried you across many miles of seeking. Your clothing is the rough woven fabric of ordinary people, honest cloth that speaks of work and daily bread, of hands that know both labor and prayer. You are not a person of great importance in the eyes of the world, but you carry within your chest a heart that beats with the same longings that have echoed through human souls since time began. Listen to the sounds that fill this ancient air. There's the bleating of sheep being led to pasture by shepherds whose faces are weathered by sun and wind. Men who know each animal in their care by name and would risk their lives to protect even the smallest lamb. From nearby courtyards comes the rhythmic grinding of millstones as women prepare the daily bread, their voices rising and falling in conversations that weave together concerns about families, celebrations of small joys, and the shared wisdom that passes between those who understand life's true rhythms. The Sea of Galilee stretches before you in the distance, its surface catching light like scattered jewels, sometimes mirror calm, and sometimes stirred by winds that seem to come from nowhere and everywhere at once. Fishing boats dot the water, their weathered sails filled with breeze that has blown across these waters since creation began. The fishermen who work these nets know patience, know waiting, know the hope that casts itself upon waters day after day, trusting that provision will come. Children run past you on the road, their laughter bright as temple bells, their feet sure on stones worn smooth by countless generations of travelers. They carry nothing but joy, these little ones who haven't yet learned to worry about tomorrow's bread or yesterday's mistakes. Their eyes hold the kind of wonder that recognizes miracle in the ordinary flight of sparrows, in the way morning light transforms drops of dew into tiny prisms that hold all the colors of heaven. Merchants pass by leading donkeys heavy with goods from far places, their saddlebags fragrant with spices that speak of lands beyond the horizon. There are traders in fine fabrics, their wares gleaming with threads of purple and scarlet that catch the eye like small flames. Others carry pottery, each vessel shaped by hands that know the ancient dance between clay and creativity, between practical need and the human impulse to make something beautiful. The very air seems pregnant with expectation here, as if creation itself is holding its breath for something wonderful to unfold. There's a quality of listening in this landscape, a sense that the hills and valleys, the olive groves and vineyards, even the sparrows that nest in the temple eaves are all waiting for a word that will change everything. You feel it too, this anticipation that hums just beneath the surface of daily life. It's in the way people's faces turn toward strangers on the road, wondering if this might be the messenger they've been waiting for. It's in the extra moment of silence that follows the reading of ancient prophecies in the synagogues, the pause that holds space for fulfillment to arrive. As you continue walking this ancient road, your modern worries continue to fall away like dust shaken from a traveler's cloak. The deadlines that seemed so urgent, the conflicts that consumed your thoughts, the endless stream of information that normally fills your mind, all of it fades into insignificance against the backdrop of these eternal hills where something sacred is about to unfold. Your heart is opening like a flower that has been waiting all day for just this moment when the light is perfect for blooming. You are ready now to meet the one whose love will transform this ordinary landscape into holy ground, whose presence will turn every simple encounter into a glimpse of divine grace made visible in human form. Chapter 3. the man from Nazareth in the gentle rhythm of your breathing. Deeper now with each peaceful exhale. Let your heart prepare to encounter the most extraordinary life ever lived in the most ordinary of circumstances. Far from the marble halls where earthly power makes its pronouncements. Far from the centers of learning where scholars debate fine points of theology. In a small hill town where most houses share walls and everyone knows their neighbor's daily rhythms, a child grew to manhood who would reshape human understanding of what it means to be beloved. Nazareth sits nestled among the hills of Galilee like a sparrow's nest, tucked into the crook of an ancient olive tree. It's the kind of place that appears on no important maps, that traveling merchants pass through without pausing, that city dwellers mention only to illustrate how unremarkable a place can be. The roads that lead to Nazareth are narrow and dusty, suited more for donkeys than for the horses of important visitors. Yet it was here, in this forgotten corner of the world, that heaven chose to dwell among us. Picture the workshop where Jesus learned the trade that would occupy his hands for most of his earthly years. It's a simple room with stone walls that stay cool even in the heat of summer, with windows placed to catch the morning light when the air is still clear, and the work can be done with precision. The scent of different woods mingles here, cedar and olive, sycamore and oak, each with its own grain and character, each requiring different tools and techniques to shape into something useful and beautiful. His father Joseph, a man whose weathered hands speak of years spent in honest labor, teaches his son not just the skills of carpentry, but the deeper lessons that come through working with materials that have their own wisdom. Wood teaches patience because it cannot be rushed. It teaches humility because even the most skilled craftsman must respect the natural strengths and weaknesses of every piece. It teaches hope because every project begins with faith that something beautiful can emerge from what appears to be merely raw material. Watch young Jesus as he learns to feel the grain of wood with his fingertips, to listen for the sound that tells him when a joint fits perfectly, to see in a rough plank the table that will gather families for countless meals of bread and fellowship. His mother Mary sometimes brings him water when the day grows warm, and in her eyes you can see both the normal pride of any mother in her growing son and something deeper. Awareness that this child carries within himself mysteries that she treasures in her heart like precious pearls. The religious world of his time is complex, layered with traditions that reach back through centuries of attempting to understand how the divine and human can meet. The temple in Jerusalem stands as the magnificent center of Jewish worship, its courts and chambers designed to accommodate the thousands who come for festivals, its rituals performed by priests whose lineage traces back through generations of holy service. Here the sacred fire burns continuously. Here the ancient songs rise like incense. Here the people come to offer their sacrifices and seek forgiveness for their failings. But alongside this official religious structure, there exists a yearning among ordinary people for something more immediate, more personal, more accessible than the elaborate systems of sacrifice and ceremony. In synagogues throughout the land, in homes where families gather for Sabbath meals, in the conversations of neighbors drawing water from community wells, there's a hunger for the divine that feels as close as breathing, as intimate as the love between parent and child. The political landscape is equally complex, dominated by the reality of Roman occupation that colors every aspect of daily life. Roman soldiers patrol the roads, Roman coins bear the image of Caesar. Roman law determines how justice is administered and taxes collected. For a proud people who remember the great kings of their past, who cherish promises of restoration and independence, this foreign domination creates a constant tension between acceptance and resistance, between prudent compliance and rebellious hope. Into this world of religious complexity and political tension, Jesus grows from childhood to manhood, learning not only the skills of his trade, but absorbing the deeper currents of longing that flow through his people's hearts. He listens to the conversations in the marketplace, where farmers speak of their struggles to pay taxes while still feeding their families. He observes the way people's faces change when Roman patrols pass by, how eyes lower and voices drop, how the laughter of children becomes subdued until the soldiers move on. In the synagogue, he hears the ancient scriptures read aloud, prophecies that speak of a time when justice will roll down like waters and righteousness like a mighty stream, when the wolf shall dwell with the lamb and a little child shall lead them. He watches the faces of those who listen, sees how their eyes grow distant with longing, how their hands grip their prayer shawls tighter when the reader speaks of comfort for the afflicted and good news for the poor. But perhaps most significantly, he witnesses the daily struggles of ordinary people trying to live with dignity and compassion in a world that often seems to reward neither. He sees widows who have nothing but trust in God's provision, working with their hands to earn their daily bread while caring for children and aging parents. He observes the way neighbors help each other during harvest time, how communities come together when tragedy strikes, how human kindness persists even under the weight of hardship and oppression. All of these experiences are shaping him, preparing him for a ministry that will address not just the spiritual hunger of his time, but the full spectrum of human need. His heart is being formed by exposure to both the heights of religious aspiration and the depths of human suffering, both the beauty of creation and the brokenness that sin has introduced into the world. As your breathing continues its peaceful rhythm, feel yourself drawn deeper into appreciation for this ordinary childhood that was preparing an extraordinary mission. In the simple rhythm of daily work, in the faithful observance of religious traditions, in the loving care of family relationships, the foundation was being laid for a life that would demonstrate once and for all what perfect love looks like when it takes human form. Chapter 4. The beginning of something sacred. Your heart continues its steady rhythm, each beat now synchronized with the deeper peace that comes from settling into sacred story. Feel yourself drawn now to the banks of the Jordan River, where something is stirring among the people of Israel. The air itself seems charged with anticipation, as if creation is preparing to witness a moment that will divide history into before and after. A threshold that will be crossed not with armies or proclamations, but with water and the descent of divine presence. John the Baptist stands in the shallows of the river, his figure striking against the backdrop of wilderness and sky. His clothing is simple, woven from camel hair and secured with a leather belt, the garb of one who has chosen to step away from the comforts of civilization to prepare his heart for divine encounter. His voice carries across the water with the authority of prophets who have gone before, calling people to turn away from the paths that lead nowhere and toward the one who is coming to make all things new. The crowds that gather are diverse, united only by their shared sense that something significant is about to unfold. There are fishermen whose hands still smell of their nets, farmers with soil under their fingernails from morning work in their fields, merchants who have set aside their trading for something they sense is far more valuable than silver or gold. There are religious leaders who have traveled from Jerusalem, their fine robes somewhat incongruous beside the rough clothing of peasants, but their hearts perhaps equally hungry for authentic encounter with the divine. Children splash in the shallows while their parents wade deeper, the river embracing rich and poor, learned and simple, young and old with the same welcoming waters. This is baptism as return to innocence, as symbol of washing away, not just the specific failures that weigh on individual consciences, but the very sense of separation from God that has plagued human hearts since the beginning. And then he comes walking among the crowd with no fanfare, no announcement of his arrival. Jesus approaches the riverbank like any other seeker, his carpenter's hands familiar with honest work, his eyes holding the same longing for divine connection that has drawn all these others to this place. To the casual observer, there's nothing that marks him as different from the dozens of others waiting their turn to be baptized. He waits patiently, speaks quietly with those around him, shares in the common humanity that has brought everyone to acknowledge their need for cleansing and renewal. When Jesus asks John to baptize him, The Baptist's initial protest reveals his recognition of something that others have not yet seen. This is not a man who needs to repent of wrongdoing, not someone seeking forgiveness for failures or freedom from the burden of guilt. This is someone whose heart is already perfectly aligned with the divine will, whose life has been a seamless expression of love and obedience. Yet he chooses to wade into these waters anyway, to identify completely with the human condition, to stand in solidarity with all who seek restoration and new beginning. Watch as Jesus descends beneath the surface of the Jordan, the water closing over his head in what becomes a symbol of his willingness to be buried with humanity's need, to descend to whatever depths are necessary to reach every lost soul. When he rises from the water, droplets catching the light like tiny mirrors reflecting heaven back to earth, something unprecedented occurs. The heavens open, not metaphorically but visibly, as if the boundary between divine realm and human world has become transparent. The Spirit of God descends like a dove, gentle yet unmistakable, settling upon Jesus in a way that makes visible the eternal relationship between Father and Son. The voice that speaks from heaven is not thunderous or terrifying, but filled with such love that it reaches into every heart present, affirming not just Jesus' identity, but the possibility that all who listen might also be beloved children of the Most High. This moment becomes the launch point for everything that follows. Jesus emerges from the Jordan knowing with complete clarity that his time of preparation is ending and his public ministry is beginning. The Spirit that has descended upon him will lead him first into the wilderness, where he will face the same temptations that have derailed human hearts since the beginning, proving once and for all that perfect love and trust in the Father can overcome every strategy of evil. But beyond the wilderness lies the real mission, the calling to gather around himself a community of ordinary people who will be transformed by proximity to perfect love. These will not be the religious elite or the politically powerful, not the wealthy who can fund movements or the learned who can craft persuasive arguments. They will be fishermen and tax collectors, women with questionable pasts and children who have no social standing whatsoever, people whose primary qualification is their recognition of their own need for what Jesus offers. Feel yourself among those early crowds, drawn not by curiosity about a new religious teacher, but by something deeper, a stirring in your heart that recognizes the voice of the shepherd for whom you've been waiting. The loneliness that has followed you through your days, the sense of being unworthy of love, the fear that your failures have placed you beyond the reach of grace, all of it begins to dissolve in the presence of one whose very being proclaims that no one is too far gone. No heart too broken, no life too ordinary to be chosen for extraordinary purpose. This is the beginning of the most beautiful chapter in human history, the story of how divine love chose to express itself not through conquest or coercion, but through invitation, through patient teaching, through miracles that heal not just bodies, but the deeper wounds of souls that have forgotten they were created for fellowship with God. As your breathing deepens and your heart opens wider to receive this sacred narrative, you are preparing to walk alongside the disciples, to witness firsthand what happens when perfect love encounters human need. Chapter 5. Words that changed everything in the deepening peace of your rest. Let yourself be carried to a hillside overlooking the Sea of Galilee, where the morning air is fresh with possibility and the grass beneath your feet is still jeweled with dew. Crowds have gathered here, drawn by something they cannot fully name but cannot ignore, a hunger that goes deeper than bread, a thirst that no earthly well can satisfy. They have left their daily tasks, their familiar routines, their comfortable certainties to follow a voice that speaks to the deepest longings of the human heart. Jesus sits naturally among them, not elevated on a platform or separated by ceremonial barriers, but close enough that those in the front rows can see the expressions that cross his face, can hear not just his words, but the tone of voice that carries more healing than medicine, more comfort than any earthly embrace. His presence creates a circle of safety where the most wounded souls can dare to hope again, where those who have been rejected by society can imagine they might be welcome in the kingdom of heaven. Listen now as his voice rises over the gathered multitude, each word chosen with perfect precision, each phrase crafted to penetrate the defenses that hearts build against further disappointment. These are not abstract theological concepts being discussed, but practical truths about how to live as beloved children of the Most High, how to find blessing even in circumstances that the world counts as cursed. Blessed are the poor in spirit, he says, and immediately those who have felt spiritually bankrupt, who have tried to earn God's favor through their own efforts and failed repeatedly, feel their hearts leap with recognition. This is speaking directly to them, to their sense of spiritual poverty that they thought disqualified them from divine love. Instead, Jesus declares this very awareness of need to be the doorway into the kingdom of heaven. Blessed are those who mourn, continues that voice that somehow makes everything it touches sacred, and the widows who have wept until they thought their tears were exhausted, the parents who have lost children, the hearts broken by betrayal and abandonment. All discover that their tears have been seen. Their grief has been held in divine hands that understand suffering from the inside. Feel yourself among these listeners as Jesus continues painting a picture of a reality that turns worldly values completely upside down. The meek who have been trampled by the powerful are promised inheritance of the earth itself. Those who hunger and thirst for righteousness with the same desperation that starving people crave food are assured they will be satisfied. The merciful who have chosen forgiveness over revenge, compassion over judgment, will themselves receive mercy beyond their wildest dreams. The crowd grows quieter as the implications of these teachings begin to sink in. This is not just inspirational speaking, designed to make people feel temporarily better about their circumstances. This is a complete redefinition of what constitutes a successful, meaningful, blessed life. The values that drive most human ambition, the goals that consume most people's energy, the fears that control most decisions, all of it is being gently but radically challenged. When Jesus speaks of being the salt of the earth and the light of the world, you can feel the responsibility and the honor of being chosen for such purpose, settling on hearts that had thought themselves insignificant. These ordinary people, struggling with ordinary problems, carrying ordinary griefs and hopes, are being told that their lives matter in extraordinary ways, that their love and faithfulness can preserve and illuminate a world that desperately needs both. The teachings that follow penetrate even deeper into the practical realities of daily life. You have heard it said that you shall not murder, but I tell you that anger harbored in the heart is the beginning of murder. The religious leaders in the crowd shift uncomfortably, recognizing that this standard goes far beyond external compliance with rules to address the conditions of the heart that give birth to harmful actions. You have heard it said, an eye for an eye and a tooth for a tooth. But I tell you, do not resist an evil person. If someone strikes you on the right cheek, turn to him the other also. The radical nature of this teaching sends ripples through the assembled listeners. This is not just about being nice or trying to get along with difficult people. This is about breaking the cycles of retaliation that keep communities trapped in escalating conflicts, about demonstrating a love so secure that it doesn't need to defend itself. Love your enemies and pray for those who persecute you, that you may be sons of your Father in heaven. He causes his sun to rise on the evil and the good, and sends rain on the righteous and the unrighteous. The silence that follows this statement is profound. Everyone present knows the weight of genuine hatred, the satisfaction of nurturing grudges, the way that enemies can consume mental and emotional energy even when they're not present. To love them instead, to pray for their welfare, seems almost impossible. Yet there's something in Jesus' voice that makes it sound not only possible but liberating. As the teaching continues, moving through topics of prayer and fasting, of worry and trust, of judgment and forgiveness, you can feel the familiar architecture of your own heart being gently demolished and rebuilt according to completely different blueprints. The ways you've learned to protect yourself, to advance your interests, to measure your worth. All of it is being revealed as unnecessary, even counterproductive to the life of blessing that God intends. Do not worry about tomorrow, for tomorrow will worry about itself. Each day has enough trouble of its own. These words land on hearts that have been consumed with anxiety about future provision, about whether there will be enough resources, enough time, enough strength for whatever challenges lie ahead. Jesus points to the flowers blooming in the nearby fields, to the birds whose songs provide the soundtrack for this outdoor cathedral, reminding his listeners that the same God who provides for these creatures surely knows and cares about the needs of his human children. The golden light of late afternoon begins to slant across the hillside as Jesus continues weaving together teachings that feel both revolutionary and somehow familiar, as if they're awakening truths that hearts have always known but forgotten. This is what love looks like when it's given flesh and voice, when it chooses to dwell among us not as distant deity, but as intimate friend who understands exactly what we need to hear. As your breathing deepens with each peaceful moment, let these words settle into your heart like seeds planted in good soil, ready to grow into the kind of life that reflects heaven's values even while living on earth. Tomorrow's worries can wait. Tonight, you are held in the love that spoke these truths into existence. Chapter 6. Miracles of Compassion. Your heart continues its gentle rhythm as we move deeper into the sacred story, where the teachings of Jesus become embodied in acts of healing that reveal the heart of God toward human suffering. Feel yourself walking now along the dusty paths where crowds gathered, not just to hear words of wisdom, but to witness love made tangible, to see with their own eyes what happens when divine compassion encounters human need in all its varied forms. The sun is warm on your shoulders as you join the throng following Jesus from village to village. There's an electricity of hope in the air, conversations buzzing with reports of what he has already done in other places. A leper cleansed, they whisper, not just healed of his disease but restored to community, able to embrace his family again after years of isolation. A paralyzed man who walked home carrying the mat on which he had been carried to Jesus. A woman whose hemorrhaging had stopped after 12 years of suffering, 12 years of being considered ritually unclean, 12 years of watching her resources drain away on physicians who could not help. You find yourself walking beside a father whose face is etched with the particular kind of desperate hope that belongs to parents of suffering children. His son has been having seizures, episodes so violent that the boy sometimes throws himself into fire or water, endangering his life while his father watches helplessly. The local religious leaders have told him the condition is a result of sin, either his own or his ancestors, adding the weight of guilt to an already unbearable burden of fear and helplessness. I heard, the man says to anyone who will listen, that he doesn't ask about what we've done wrong, that he just looks at the suffering and responds with healing. Could such a thing be true? His voice carries the tremor of someone who has been disappointed so many times that hope itself has become painful, yet who cannot stop hoping because the alternative is too terrible to contemplate. Near the shores of Galilee, you witness one of the most tender of Jesus' miracles. An elderly woman, bent nearly double with a spinal condition that has progressively worsened over 18 years, shuffles toward him with the slow determination of someone for whom each step requires significant effort. She has been to the synagogue regularly throughout these years of increasing disability, sitting in the section reserved for women, listening to readings about God's power to heal while her own body has grown progressively more twisted and painful. When Jesus sees her, he doesn't wait for her to ask or even to make her way to him through the crowd. He calls her forward with a voice so gentle that it could coax flowers to bloom out of season. "Woman, you are set free from your infirmity." Before anyone can debate the theological implications or question whether healing should happen on the Sabbath, he places his hands on her bowed shoulders. Watch as she straightens slowly, vertebra by vertebra, like a flower turning toward sunlight. The gasps from the crowd fade to reverent silence as 18 years of curvature are undone in moments. As muscles that have forgotten how to properly support her frame remember their purpose. As a spine that has been compressed into unnatural angles unfolds into the posture for which it was originally designed. The tears that stream down her face are not just tears of physical relief, but of recognition that she has been seen, truly seen, by eyes that looked past her disability to the beloved daughter of Abraham she has always been. For 18 years, she has been known primarily by her affliction, defined by her limitations. In this moment, she's being redefined by divine love that sees her true identity and calls it forth with irresistible gentleness. But it's not just individual healings that reveal the heart of Jesus. It's the way he responds to collective human need with practical compassion that addresses both physical and spiritual hunger. Picture yourself among the 5,000 who have followed him to a remote area near Bethsaida. The teaching has been extraordinary, words that have fed souls starved for truth. But as evening approaches, the reality of physical hunger begins to assert itself. The disciples, practical men accustomed to managing resources, want to send the crowds away to buy food in the surrounding villages. It's a reasonable suggestion, the sensible response to a logistical challenge that threatens to become a crisis. But Jesus looks at these faces, sees the mixture of spiritual satisfaction and physical need, and refuses to send anyone away hungry from the feast of his presence. A small boy steps forward with his lunch, 5 small barley loaves and 2 fish, hardly enough for himself, let alone a crowd that stretches as far as the eye can see. It's the kind of gesture that adults might dismiss as sweet but impractical, childish generosity that doesn't understand the scope of the problem. But Jesus receives this offering with the same seriousness he gives to everything placed in his hands, blessing it with prayers that acknowledge its source in the God who provides for all creation. Feel the wonder that spreads through the crowd as the food multiplies in ways that defy explanation but not experience. Baskets are filled and refilled, passed from person to person until everyone has eaten their fill. There's something profoundly intimate about sharing a meal provided by miracle, about tasting bread that has been blessed by hands that shaped stars, fish that has been touched by fingers that traced the boundaries of seas. This is not magic performed for entertainment or power displayed for its own sake. This is compassion responding to genuine need with generosity that goes beyond the minimum required for survival to abundance that speaks of a love that delights in blessing its children. The 12 baskets of leftovers gathered afterward are not just practical conservation, but testimony that divine provision always exceeds human need, that the heart of God runs toward abundance rather than scarcity. Later, as the crowd finally begins to disperse, you notice how many linger, reluctant to leave this place where they have experienced not just physical healing and feeding, but something deeper, the sense of being in the presence of one who sees their need without judgment, who responds to their suffering with immediate, effective compassion, who treats their concerns as his own concerns. In the gathering dusk, as the last of the healed are making their way home, you realize you have witnessed something that reveals the very character of God. These miracles are not random displays of supernatural power, but consistent expressions of a heart that cannot bear to see suffering without responding, that looks at human need and moves toward it with healing touch and provision that exceeds all expectation. As your own heart settles deeper into peace with each gentle breath, let the memory of these miracles remind you that the same compassion that moved Jesus to heal the sick and feed the hungry is available to you tonight, ready to touch whatever areas of your life need divine healing, ready to provide whatever your heart truly requires for rest and restoration. Chapter 7. Walking among the people, feel yourself settling even deeper into the sacred rhythm of rest as we continue walking alongside Jesus through the ordinary moments that reveal the extraordinary nature of divine love lived out in human form. Your breathing has found its perfect pace now, each inhale drawing in peace, each exhale releasing the tensions that no longer serve you. In this gentle state of receptivity, let yourself witness how Jesus moved through daily life, how his presence transformed the most common interactions into encounters with grace. Picture a typical morning in Capernaum, the fishing village that became something of a home base for Jesus' ministry. The sun is just painting the eastern hills with soft gold, and the streets are beginning to stir with the familiar rhythms of daily life. Fishermen are returning from night ventures on the lake, their boats heavy with silver catches that will feed families throughout the surrounding area. Women are drawing water from the community well, their conversations weaving together concerns about children, celebrations of small joys, and the shared wisdom that flows between those who understand life's true priorities. Jesus walks among them with no fanfare, no entourage to announce his approach or clear a path before him. He stops to admire a fisherman's particularly fine catch, sharing in the man's satisfaction at a successful night's work. He pauses to help an elderly woman balance the water jar on her shoulder, his touch so natural that she accepts the assistance before she realizes who has offered it. When children run past in their games, he steps aside with the same courtesy he would show to important visitors, but his eyes follow their play with delight that makes their laughter somehow brighter. There's a quality of attention in the way Jesus engages with people that transforms even the briefest encounters. When a merchant shows him pottery or fabric, Jesus examines it with genuine interest, asking questions about technique and craftsmanship that reveal his own background as a worker with his hands. He understands the pride that comes from creating something beautiful and useful, the satisfaction of skills developed through years of patient practice, the way that honest work becomes a form of prayer when it's done with integrity and care. Watch him with the children who seem drawn to him like flowers turning towards sunlight. While the adults often approach with specific requests or careful questions designed to test his orthodoxy, the children come simply because they sense safety in his presence, a welcome that asks nothing of them but their authentic selves. He listens to their chatter with the same seriousness. He gives to theological discussions, responds to their questions with answers that honor their capacity to understand profound truths. When a small girl shows him a flower she has picked, Jesus examines it as if it contains all the mysteries of creation, pointing out the delicate veining in its petals, the way its colors seem to hold light, the perfect architecture of its stem and leaves. "See how beautifully your heavenly Father has clothed this flower," he tells her, and in that moment, she understands something about her own worth that will stay with her for the rest of her life. The social outcasts of his time find in Jesus something they have never experienced before: acceptance without conditions. The tax collectors who have made themselves wealthy by collaborating with Roman occupiers, who are despised by their own people as traitors and extortioners, discover that his table is open to them. Not after they reform their ways or make public apologies or promise to change their behavior, but simply because they are children of Abraham who have lost their way and need to remember the way home. Zacchaeus climbs a sycamore tree to catch a glimpse of Jesus over the crowds, his short stature making it impossible to see through the throng of taller people, who would never willingly make room for someone of his profession. When Jesus looks up and calls him by name, inviting himself to dinner at the tax collector's house, the shock ripples through the crowd like stones thrown into still water. This is not how religious teachers are supposed to behave, not how holy men maintain their reputations for righteousness. But Jesus sees past the social categories that divide people into acceptable and unacceptable, worthy and unworthy of divine attention. He sees Zacchaeus as a man whose wealth has not filled the emptiness in his heart, whose success by worldly standards has cost him the very thing he most needs: genuine human connection rooted in love rather than fear or greed. The dinner they share becomes a celebration of transformation, as Zacchaeus discovers that true generosity flows naturally from hearts that have been touched by unconditional acceptance. The women who follow Jesus experience something revolutionary in his treatment of them. In a culture where women's voices are rarely heard in public discourse, where their primary value is measured by their relationships to men as daughters, wives, or mothers. Jesus engages with them as individuals with their own thoughts, insights, and spiritual gifts. Mary of Magdala, from whom he has cast out 7 demons, becomes one of his most devoted followers, her past not held against her, but transformed into testimony of the power of divine love to restore what seemed irredeemably broken. Martha and Mary of Bethany open their home to him regularly, their house becoming a refuge where he can rest between the demands of public ministry. When Martha busies herself with elaborate preparations while Mary sits at Jesus' feet listening to his teaching, his gentle correction reveals not criticism of hospitality, but affirmation that women, too, are invited to be disciples, to choose the better part of learning and spiritual growth rather than being confined to domestic roles alone. The woman caught in adultery, dragged before him by religious leaders more interested in trapping him than in true justice, experiences mercy that redefines her understanding of her own worth. Let him who is without sin among you be the first to throw a stone at her, Jesus says, and one by one the accusers slip away, their own consciences activated by his words. When they are alone, he asks, "Woman, where are your accusers? Has no one condemned you?" Her whispered, "No one, Lord," opens the door for words that change everything. "Neither do I condemn you. Go, and sin no more." This is not casual dismissal of wrongdoing, but recognition that shame and condemnation have never been effective teachers of righteousness. Love that sees past failure to the person God intended. Love that offers fresh starts without dwelling on past mistakes. Love that believes in the possibility of transformation, even when evidence suggests otherwise. This is the love that actually changes hearts and lives. Feel yourself among these ordinary people whose lives were touched by extraordinary grace. Perhaps you recognize yourself in the tax collector who has compromised his integrity for financial gain, or in the woman whose reputation has been destroyed by poor choices, or in the disciples who repeatedly misunderstood Jesus' mission and competed for positions of honor in a kingdom they imagined in entirely worldly terms. The beautiful truth that emerges from all these encounters is that Jesus never waited for people to become worthy of his attention before offering it. He loved them into wholeness rather than demanding wholeness as a prerequisite for love. His presence in their lives created safe space for authentic transformation, the kind that grows from the inside out as hearts are healed of the wounds that drove destructive behaviors in the first place. As your breathing continues its peaceful rhythm, let yourself rest in the assurance that the same unconditional acceptance that Jesus offered to everyone he encountered is available to you tonight. Whatever categories the world might use to define you, whatever mistakes might cloud your past, whatever insecurities might whisper lies about your worth, none of it changes your fundamental identity as a beloved child of the Most High, created for relationship with the one whose love makes all things new. In the gentle darkness that surrounds your rest, feel that love drawing near, not to judge or condemn, but to heal and restore. Not to point out failures, but to celebrate the beautiful person you are becoming through the patient work of grace. This is how Jesus walked among people then, and this is how he walks among us still. Chapter 8. Fellow seekers of peace, your heart has found its deep rhythm now. Each beat a gentle reminder that you are held in love that never wavers, never grows weary, never withdraws its blessing from those who seek its embrace. As we pause here in our sacred journey, in this place where the teachings and miracles of Jesus have begun to reveal the character of divine love made visible, I feel moved to acknowledge the beautiful community that has gathered around this story. If you've been walking this path with us tonight, breathing in the peace of these ancient narratives, letting your soul be nourished by accounts of grace meeting human need, then you are part of something sacred that extends far beyond your individual quest for rest. You are among fellow seekers, hearts that have recognized their need for the kind of peace that transcends understanding, souls that have chosen to turn away from the noise and hurry of modern life toward the timeless rhythms of sacred story. Feel the presence of others who, like you, have discovered in these quiet moments a refuge from the demands that pull at our attention throughout the day. There are those listening who carry the weight of difficult decisions, who go to sleep each night wondering if they've chosen wisely, if their efforts have been sufficient, if tomorrow will bring resolution to the challenges that seem to multiply faster than solutions can be found. Tonight, in this space we've created together, those worries can rest while hearts remember what truly matters. There are others among us tonight who struggle with loneliness, who find themselves surrounded by people, yet somehow disconnected from the deep communion for which their souls hunger. To you, I want to say that you are not alone in this listening, not isolated in your seeking. The very fact that you've been drawn to this story of radical love and unconditional acceptance suggests that your heart recognizes its true home, even when circumstances make that home feel distant or difficult to reach. Some who join us carry grief that feels too heavy for shoulders that have already borne so much, losses that have left empty spaces no amount of activity or distraction can fill. The Jesus we've been encountering tonight understands grief from the inside, knows what it means to weep over those he loves, to feel the full weight of human sorrow without being crushed by it. His promise that those who mourn will be comforted is not distant theological concept, but immediate reality, for hearts willing to receive divine consolation. There are parents listening who lie awake worrying about children, who seem to be making choices that lead away from safety and wisdom, whose love feels helpless against forces they cannot control or influences they cannot counter. The same Jesus who blessed children and warned against causing them to stumble is watching over your little ones and your grown ones with care that exceeds even your parental devotion, love that pursues them down every path they choose to walk. If you've found solace in these moments we've shared, if the peace we've discovered together has begun to touch the places in your heart that most need healing, I want to invite you to consider joining our community more permanently. There's something beautiful that happens when seekers of peace gather intentionally, when we choose to support each other in the quest for deeper connection with divine love and with the timeless truths that anchor souls in turbulent times. By subscribing to our channel, you become part of a fellowship of those who believe that ancient stories still speak to contemporary hearts, that the love demonstrated by Jesus continues to offer healing for wounds that seem beyond human remedy. Your presence here enriches all of us. Your seeking encourages others, who sometimes wonder if they're the only ones who need this kind of spiritual nourishment in a world that often seems to value everything except peace. Each time you choose to return to these sacred spaces we create together, you're making a statement about what you believe matters most. You're choosing depth over superficiality, timeless truth over temporal distraction, soul care over the endless demands of a culture that mistakes busyness for importance. Your commitment to this kind of intentional rest and spiritual reflection helps create space for others who are just beginning to discover their need for what we're sharing. Consider, too, sharing your own reflections in the comments below, the ways this story is touching your heart, the particular aspects of Jesus' ministry that speak most directly to your current circumstances. There's profound encouragement that comes from reading how others are finding hope and healing in the same truths that are ministering to your own spirit. Your words might be exactly what another seeker needs to hear tonight. The affirmation that their seeking is valid, their need is understood, their journey toward peace is shared by others who understand. Sometimes the questions you bring, the struggles you're willing to share, the victories you're experiencing become gifts to the entire community. None of us has all the answers, but together we carry pieces of wisdom that, when shared openly and lovingly, create a more complete picture of how divine love works in human lives. Your voice matters in this conversation. Your experience adds richness to our collective understanding. In this gentle pause in our journey, let yourself feel the blessing of belonging to something larger than individual seeking, to a community of hearts that have recognized their need for the peace that Jesus offered to all who would receive it. Your presence here is not accidental. You have been drawn to this place by the same love that drew crowds to lakeshores and hillsides 2,000 years ago. The love that continues to call weary souls home to rest. As we prepare to continue our journey deeper into the sacred story, carry with you the awareness that you do not travel alone. We are fellow pilgrims on the ancient path toward peace, companions in the timeless quest for hearts that are fully alive, fully loved, fully at rest in the embrace of grace that makes all things new. Chapter 9. The 12 and their stories. Your breathing has settled into the deep rhythm of complete rest now. Each exhale carrying away any remaining tension, each inhale drawing in the peace that comes from dwelling in sacred story. Feel yourself drawing closer to the inner circle of Jesus' ministry, to those ordinary men who left everything familiar to follow someone whose presence in their lives changed, not just their circumstances but their understanding of who they were meant to become. Simon Peter walks beside you on the dusty road, his fisherman's hands still bearing the calluses from years of working nets, his weathered face telling stories of nights on the lake when storms threatened to overwhelm his boat. He's the kind of man who speaks before he thinks, whose emotions run close to the surface, whose loyalty burns bright even when his understanding falls short. Watch how his relationship with Jesus unfolds like a flower opening slowly to sunlight, each interaction revealing new depths of both human weakness and divine patience. Remember the night when Peter and his partners had worked until dawn without catching a single fish, their nets coming up empty despite their skill and experience. Their boats were being washed, their equipment cleaned and stored, their hopes for provision growing dim with each failed cast. When Jesus asked to use Peter's boat as a platform for teaching the crowds gathered on the shore, it seemed like small compensation for a night of fruitless labor. But then came the instruction that challenged everything Peter thought he knew about fishing these familiar waters. Put out into deep water and let down the nets for a catch. The practical part of Peter's mind protested that fish weren't biting, that they'd already tried everything, that daylight was the wrong time for the kind of catch they needed. Yet something in Jesus' voice, some quality of authority that went beyond theoretical knowledge, convinced him to try once more. Feel Peter's amazement as the nets strain with more fish than they've ever held, so many that the boats begin to sink under the weight of unexpected abundance. This is not just about fishing. This is about learning to trust instructions that seem to contradict experience, about discovering that the one who made the fish knows where they swim better than those who have spent their lives pursuing them. Peter's response reveals the mix of recognition and unworthiness that marks every genuine encounter with holiness. Go away from me. Lord, I am a sinful man. He understands instinctively that he's in the presence of someone whose purity exposes his own need for cleansing, whose goodness highlights his own moral compromise. Yet Jesus' response transforms confession of unworthiness into calling to purpose. Don't be afraid. From now on, you will catch men. Andrew, Peter's brother, has his own story of discovery. He was originally a follower of John the Baptist, drawn to the wilderness preacher's call for repentance and preparation for the coming kingdom. When John pointed to Jesus and declared, "Look, the Lamb of God," Andrew found himself following this new teacher with questions he couldn't quite articulate, hunger he couldn't fully explain. The conversation that followed changed the trajectory of Andrew's life. "What do you want?" Jesus asked, and Andrew's response revealed the deeper longing beneath his surface seeking. "Rabbi, where are you staying?" This was not just curiosity about Jesus' lodging, but desire for the kind of extended time together that would allow real relationship to develop. "Come and see," Jesus replied. And Andrew spent the day in conversation that convinced him he had found the Messiah his people had been expecting. Andrew's first impulse was to share this discovery with his brother Simon, bringing him to Jesus with excitement that could not be contained. This becomes Andrew's characteristic throughout the gospel accounts. He's the one who brings others to Jesus, who serves as bridge between seeking hearts and the one who satisfies all seeking. His own transformation creates space for others to encounter the same life-changing presence. James and John, the sons of Zebedee, were partners with Peter in the fishing business, men whose lives were intertwined by shared labor and common dreams of prosperity through hard work and wise management of resources. They left behind not just individual careers, but family business, walking away from security that had been built over generations to follow someone whose kingdom seemed to exist more in promise than in visible reality. Their mother's request that her sons be granted positions of honor in Jesus' kingdom reveals how completely they misunderstood the nature of the authority they were seeking to share. The kingdom of heaven operates according to different principles than earthly power structures, values service over dominance, sacrificial love over self-advancement. Jesus' patient correction helps them begin to comprehend that greatness in God's kingdom is measured by willingness to serve rather than ability to be served. Matthew, the tax collector, brings a completely different background to the group. His collaboration with Roman authorities has made him wealthy but despised by his own people, who see him as a traitor who profits from their oppression. The day Jesus called him to discipleship, Matthew was sitting at his tax booth, collecting revenues and commissions that built his personal fortune on the resentment of his neighbors. "Follow me," Jesus said, and Matthew's immediate response reveals how empty his prosperity had left him feeling. He walked away from financial security to embrace uncertainty, left behind social isolation imposed by his profession to join a community where acceptance was based on love rather than utility. The dinner party Matthew threw to introduce Jesus to his fellow tax collectors and other social outcasts became a celebration of grace that transcends social boundaries. Thomas, forever remembered for his doubts, actually represents the kind of honest wrestling with faith that leads to deeper conviction than easy belief ever could. His refusal to accept secondhand reports of Jesus' resurrection, his insistence on physical evidence that would convince a mind trained to be skeptical, these are not signs of weak faith but of intellectual integrity that refuses to be satisfied with wishful thinking. When Thomas finally encounters the risen Jesus, his confession becomes one of the most profound statements of faith in all the Gospels. "My Lord and my God." This is not just acknowledgement of Jesus' survival of crucifixion, but recognition of his divine identity, worship that emerges from evidence examined and found convincing by a mind that demanded proof. Each of these men brings his own story of transformation, his own journey from ordinary life into extraordinary purpose. They argue among themselves about who is greatest. They compete for Jesus' attention. They misunderstand his teachings and fail to grasp the spiritual nature of his kingdom. Yet their very humanity makes them accessible models of how divine love works in real human hearts. Patient with weaknesses, persistent in calling forth potential, faithful in completing the good work it begins. As your heart continues its peaceful rhythm, let yourself identify with these disciples in their mixture of faith and doubt, understanding and confusion, loyalty and failure. Their stories remind us that Jesus doesn't wait for perfect people to do his work in the world. He takes ordinary hearts and shapes them through relationship with himself into vessels capable of carrying divine love to others who need it as desperately as they did. Chapter 10. Opposition and persecution in the deepening stillness of your rest, where peace has become your natural state and each breath draws you further into sacred tranquility. Let us witness together how love responds when it encounters resistance, how light behaves when darkness attempts to overcome it. The story we're sharing tonight does not avoid the reality that divine love, when it takes human form, threatens every system built on power over others rather than power shared in service. Feel yourself among the crowds in Jerusalem as Jesus enters the temple courts, that magnificent structure that represents not just religious devotion but economic and political power concentrated in the hands of those who have learned to profit from people's desire to worship God. The temple has become a marketplace where access to divine favor seems to depend on ability to pay required fees to purchase approved sacrifices, to navigate systems that have made worship into commerce. Jesus moves through these courts with righteous anger that burns clean and pure, not the rage that seeks personal satisfaction, but the wrath that cannot bear to see love misrepresented, mercy commercialized, grace turned into commodity to be bought and sold. The tables of money changers crash to the floor, coins scattering across stones worn smooth by centuries of pilgrims' feet, the sound echoing off temple walls that have heard prayers and seen tears from millions of seeking hearts. "My house will be called a house of prayer," his voice carries over the chaos, "but you are making it a den of robbers." This is not just criticism of dishonest business practices, but indictment of an entire religious system that has forgotten its purpose, that has placed barriers between people and God where God intended bridges, that has created hierarchies of access to divine love that was meant to be freely available to all. Watch the faces of the religious leaders as they witness this challenge to their authority. The Pharisees, who have built their identity on meticulous observance of religious law. The Sadducees, who have accommodated Roman rule in exchange for maintaining their positions of influence. The scribes, who have made careers of interpreting divine will for others while missing its essential message of love. Their carefully constructed world is being shaken by someone who claims authority they do not recognize, whose teaching attracts crowds they cannot control, whose very presence exposes the gap between their religious performance and authentic spiritual life. The questions they bring to Jesus are not seeking truth, but setting traps, attempts to discredit him before the people who have begun to follow his teaching. "By what authority are you doing these things?" they demand, hoping to force him to claim divine prerogatives that they can then denounce as blasphemy. But Jesus responds with wisdom that turns their traps into opportunities for deeper teaching, questions that reveal their own inability to recognize divine authority when it appears in unexpected forms. Is it lawful to pay taxes to Caesar or not? They ask, believing they have created an impossible dilemma. If he says yes, he loses credibility with Jewish patriots who resent Roman taxation. If he says no, he can be reported to Roman authorities as inciting rebellion. But Jesus calls for a coin, examines the image stamped upon it, and delivers an answer that transcends their either-or thinking. Give to Caesar what is Caesar's, and to God what is God's. This response reveals the limitations of trying to trap infinite wisdom with finite questions, of attempting to reduce the complexities of living faithfully in an imperfect world to simple formulas that eliminate the need for wisdom, discernment, and dependence on divine guidance. Jesus refuses to play by rules designed to diminish his influence, instead using every challenge as opportunity to demonstrate the higher principles that should govern human relationships. The opposition grows more organized as it becomes clear that Jesus' influence is not diminishing but expanding. The religious establishment recognizes that their positions of power depend on maintaining systems he is challenging, that their income is threatened by his teaching about the free availability of divine grace, that their social status rests on people believing they need intermediaries to access God. Feel the weight of plotting that takes place in shadowed rooms, where men who claim to serve God plan to eliminate someone whose only crime is loving too freely, too inclusively, too authentically. The irony is profound and heartbreaking. Those who should be the first to recognize divine love when it appears among them become its primary opponents, not because they fail to see its power, but because they understand exactly how thoroughly it threatens their false authority. Judas Iscariot moves through these scenes like a man caught between competing loyalties, his treasury bag heavy with coins that represent security, even as his heart wrestles with growing discomfort at the direction his teacher's ministry is taking. Perhaps he imagined a different kind of kingdom when he first chose to follow, one that would overthrow Roman rule through force and establish Jewish supremacy rather than demonstrating divine love that transcends all human categories and boundaries. The other disciples struggle with their own confusion as opposition intensifies. They had expected that following the Messiah would lead to positions of honor and authority, that their faithfulness would be rewarded with earthly recognition and power. Instead, they find themselves associated with someone who is increasingly controversial, whose teaching makes enemies of the very people they had hoped to impress. Peter draws his sword in the garden, ready to fight for his Lord with the only kind of power he understands. But Jesus' rebuke reveals how completely he has misunderstood the nature of the kingdom they serve. Put your sword back in its place, for all who draw the sword will die by the sword. Do you think I cannot call on my Father, and he will at once put at my disposal more than 12 legions of angels? This moment crystallizes the fundamental difference between the kingdom of heaven and all earthly kingdoms. Divine power does not need to defend itself through violence, because it operates according to entirely different principles. Love conquers not by destroying opposition, but by absorbing it, transforming it, revealing its ultimate powerlessness against truth that cannot be killed or silenced. As your breathing continues its gentle rhythm, carrying you deeper into the peace that surpasses understanding, let yourself marvel at how differently Jesus responds to persecution than the ways human nature typically reacts to attack. There is no retaliation, no attempt to destroy those who oppose him, no mobilization of his followers to wage war against his enemies. Instead, there's persistent love that continues to offer grace even to those who reject it, truth that speaks gently even when it is shouted down, light that keeps shining even when darkness seems to prevail. This is the love that will ultimately triumph, not through force but through its own inexhaustible nature, not by overwhelming opposition but by revealing the futility of opposing what cannot be diminished by attack. In the face of every threat, this love remains itself, patient, kind, not easily angered, keeping no record of wrongs, always hoping, always persevering, never failing. Chapter 11. The Final Journey to Jerusalem. The peace that has settled over your spirit deepens now as we approach the most sacred week in human history, the 7 days that would forever change the relationship between heaven and earth. Your heart beats with the rhythm of eternity as we walk beside Jesus on the road that leads from Galilee toward Jerusalem, each step carrying him closer to the destiny he has known since his baptism in the Jordan River. Feel the weight of anticipation that hangs in the spring air as the Passover season draws near. From every corner of the known world, Jewish families are making pilgrimage to the holy city, carrying with them the hopes of generations, the prayers of ancestors, the longing for deliverance that has sustained them through centuries of waiting. The roads are crowded with travelers whose faces shine with expectation, whose conversations buzz with speculation about whether this might be the year when God acts decisively to restore their nation. Jesus walks among them with knowledge that casts both shadow and light across his features. He alone understands fully what must happen in the days ahead, what it will cost to purchase redemption for the world, what kind of victory can only be achieved through apparent defeat. The disciples sense something significant approaching but remain confused about its nature, their dreams of earthly kingdom still clouding their ability to comprehend the spiritual revolution that is about to unfold. As they crest the hill that brings Jerusalem into view, the sight never fails to take breath away. The city sprawls across its ancient hills like a crown jewel set in stone, the temple rising at its heart with walls that catch and throw back the light of the setting sun. Pilgrims pause in their journey to gaze upon this sight that represents the dwelling place of the Most High, the center of their spiritual universe, the place where heaven and earth meet in ways found nowhere else on the globe. But Jesus looks upon this city with eyes that see beyond its external glory to the hearts of those who dwell within its walls. "O Jerusalem, Jerusalem," he weeps, "you who kill the prophets and stone those sent to you. How often I have longed to gather your children together, as a hen gathers her chicks under her wings, but you were not willing." These are not words of condemnation, but of heartbreak, the grief of love that offers itself freely only to be rejected by those who need it most desperately. The next morning brings a scene that will echo through history as the triumph that contains within it the seeds of its own reversal. Jesus sends 2 disciples ahead to find a young donkey, an animal that has never been ridden, pure and suitable for carrying one whose kingdom is unlike any the world has known. The choice of mount is deeply symbolic, not a war horse that would declare military intentions, not a magnificent stallion that would speak of earthly power, but a humble donkey that speaks of peace, of service, of kingship that comes in forms the world does not recognize. Watch as word spreads through the crowds that Jesus is approaching Jerusalem, that the teacher whose miracles have become legend, whose words have brought hope to the hopeless, whose presence has made the impossible possible, is finally coming to claim his rightful place. Palm branches are cut and spread on the road before him. Cloaks are thrown down to create a carpet worthy of royalty. Voices rise in songs that have waited centuries for this moment of fulfillment. Hosanna! They shout, using a word that means, save us now. Their hearts finally believing that deliverance has arrived in the form of this gentle King who rides into their midst on borrowed donkey. Blessed is he who comes in the name of the Lord. Blessed is the King of Israel. The very stones seem ready to cry out with joy, creation itself celebrating the arrival of its Creator in the city that bears his name. Yet beneath the celebration runs an undercurrent of misunderstanding that will prove tragic in just a few days. These crowds expect a different kind of salvation than the one Jesus has come to provide. They want liberation from Roman rule, restoration of national sovereignty, establishment of earthly kingdom where they will be favored and their enemies subdued. They have not yet grasped that the salvation he offers transcends all political categories, that the kingdom he represents operates according to spiritual rather than temporal principles. The religious leaders watch this spontaneous celebration with growing alarm, recognizing that their carefully maintained balance with Roman authorities is being threatened by this popular demonstration. Teacher, rebuke your disciples. They demand, but Jesus responds with words that reveal the cosmic significance of this moment. I tell you, if they keep quiet, the stones will cry out. This is not crowd manipulation or political theater, but recognition by creation itself that prophecy is being fulfilled, that promises made through centuries of waiting are finally finding their completion. When Jesus enters the temple courts the following day, his actions reveal the gap between surface worship and authentic spiritual life. The magnificent buildings cannot mask the spiritual poverty of those who have turned worship into commerce, who have created barriers between people and God where God intended bridges, who have made access to divine grace dependent on ability to pay required fees and purchase approved sacrifices. The cleansing of the temple becomes symbol of the spiritual cleansing that all hearts need, the clearing away of everything that interferes with direct relationship between souls and their Creator. Is it not written? Jesus declares as he overturns tables and drives out those who are buying and selling. My house will be called a house of prayer for all nations, but you have made it a den of robbers. Feel the electricity that fills the air as Jesus teaches daily in the temple courts, his words carrying authority that religious leaders cannot match, wisdom that common people recognize as truth their hearts have been hungry to hear. The crowds hang on every word, sensing that they are witnessing something unprecedented, that ordinary time has been suspended to make room for the extraordinary. Children run through the temple courts, shouting, Hosanna to the Son of David, their innocent voices proclaiming truths that learned adults struggle to accept. When the chief priests and teachers of the law become indignant at this childish celebration, Jesus reminds them of scripture they should know. From the lips of children and infants you have ordained praise. As evening falls each day, Jesus retreats with his disciples to Bethany, to the home of Mary, Martha, and Lazarus, where love provides sanctuary from the growing hostility that fills Jerusalem's streets. Here he can rest in the company of those who understand something of who he truly is, who offer worship without agenda, who create space for the kind of intimate fellowship that feeds his human heart. But even in these moments of respite, the shadow of the cross grows longer across his path. The die has been cast, the final week has begun, and nothing can turn back the tide of events that will culminate in the ultimate demonstration of divine love's willingness to sacrifice everything for the sake of those who desperately need redemption but do not understand how to receive it. Your breathing continues its peaceful rhythm as we approach the deepest mysteries of faith, the events that reveal both the worst of human nature and the best of divine love, the darkness that will give way to light beyond all earthly illumination. Chapter 12. The Last Supper and Betrayal in the sacred stillness that now envelops your entire being, where peace has become as natural as breathing and rest as essential as heartbeat. We enter the most intimate of all the scenes in Jesus' earthly ministry. Feel yourself drawn into an upper room in Jerusalem where shadows dance gently in the light of oil lamps, where the air is thick with significance that the participants are only beginning to comprehend. The Passover meal has been prepared with loving care, each element carrying centuries of meaning, each tradition connecting this small gathering to the great story of God's faithfulness to his people. The lamb has been roasted according to ancient specifications, its blood a reminder of protection provided when death passed over the homes of those who trusted divine instruction. Unleavened bread waits to be broken, wine stands ready to be poured. Herbs have been gathered to remind hearts of both bitter slavery and sweet deliverance. Jesus moves through these preparations with deliberate intention, knowing that this will be his last opportunity to share ordinary human fellowship with the men who have walked closest to him through 3 years of ministry. His eyes linger on each face around the table, seeing past their present confusion to the mature leaders they will become after his resurrection, past their coming failures to the faithful service that will mark the rest of their lives. Watch as he rises from the table and begins to remove his outer garments, wrapping a towel around his waist like a servant preparing for menial labor. The disciples shift uncomfortably as he pours water into a basin and approaches Peter with the intention of washing feet that are dusty from Jerusalem's streets, calloused from years of walking countless miles in simple sandals. "No," Peter protests, his voice carrying the shock of seeing his master assume the role of a servant. "You shall never wash my feet." Peter's instinctive reaction reveals how completely he still misunderstands the nature of true authority, the way power operates in the kingdom of heaven. But Jesus' gentle insistence breaks through his resistance. "Unless I wash you, you have no part with me." Feel the profound intimacy of this moment as Jesus kneels before each disciple, taking feet that have carried them over dusty roads into his hands, washing away not just physical dirt, but demonstrating the kind of cleansing that his death will make available to all humanity. This is love in its most practical form, divinity expressing itself through the humblest of services, the creator of the universe caring for the physical needs of his creation. "Do you understand what I have done for you?" he asks after completing this act of service. "You call me teacher and Lord, and rightly so, for that is what I am. Now that I, your Lord and teacher, have washed your feet, you also should wash one another's feet. I have set you an example that you should do as I have done for you." The bread that Jesus breaks carries new meaning as he holds it in hands that have shaped wood, healed the sick, blessed children, and will soon bear nails. "This is my body given for you," he says. And though the disciples cannot yet fully comprehend what these words mean, their hearts sense the weight of covenant being established, of love making itself vulnerable in ways that will cost everything. The wine that he passes speaks of blood that will be shed not in violence, but in sacrifice, not in rage but in love, not for his own sake, but for the sake of every human heart that has ever felt separated from God by guilt, shame, fear, or simple inability to bridge the gap between human need and divine holiness. "This cup is the new covenant in my blood, which is poured out for you for the forgiveness of sins." But even in this sacred moment, betrayal sits at the table, wearing a familiar face, answering to a trusted name. Judas Iscariot shares the bread and wine, receives the foot washing, participates in the intimate conversation, all while carrying in his heart the decision that will deliver his teacher into the hands of those who seek his death. The 30 pieces of silver in his possession feel heavier with each passing moment, their weight beginning to exceed whatever value he once thought they represented. "One of you will betray me," Jesus announces, and the shock that ripples around the table reveals how successfully Judas has hidden his intentions from his fellow disciples. Each man begins to examine his own heart, wondering if he might be capable of such treachery, if there might be some weakness in his loyalty that he has not recognized. "Surely not I, Lord," they ask, their questions revealing both innocence and accurate self-knowledge of human frailty. When Jesus identifies Judas as the betrayer, it's done with such subtlety that the other disciples don't understand what's happening. "What you are about to do quickly," he tells him, and Judas slips away into the night that matches the darkness gathering in his own soul. The kiss that he will use to identify Jesus in the garden becomes a symbol of how intimacy can be weaponized, how gestures of love can be perverted into instruments of destruction. Left alone with the 11 who will remain faithful despite their coming failures, Jesus speaks words that will sustain them through the dark hours ahead. "Do not let your hearts be troubled. Trust in God. Trust also in me. In my Father's house are many rooms. If it were not so, I would have told you. I am going there to prepare a place for you." The promise of future dwelling place matters less in this moment than the assurance that they are not being abandoned, that the relationship they have enjoyed with Him will continue beyond the physical separation that death will create. "And if I go and prepare a place for you, I will come back and take you to be with me, that you also may be where I am." Thomas, ever practical in his seeking for concrete understanding, voices the question that all their hearts are asking: "Lord, we don't know where you are going, so how can we know the way?" Jesus' response becomes one of the most profound declarations of his identity and mission. "I'm the way and the truth and the life. No one comes to the Father except through me." This is not exclusivity born of narrow-mindedness, but clarity about the nature of divine love and human need. There is only one bridge that can span the gap between finite and infinite, only one mediator who can represent both divine holiness and human frailty, only one sacrifice that can satisfy both justice and mercy. Jesus is not claiming to be one of many possible ways to God, but the way itself, truth embodied in human form, life that conquers death, not through avoiding it, but by passing through it into resurrection. Philip's request to see the Father reveals how even those closest to Jesus still struggle to understand the mystery of the Incarnation. "Lord, show us the Father and that will be enough for us." The response carries both gentle correction and profound revelation. "Don't you know me, Philip, even after I have been among you such a long time? Anyone who has seen me has seen the Father." This declaration transforms everything the disciples thought they understood about the relationship between divine and human nature. They have been walking with, talking to, eating with, learning from the visible expression of invisible God. Every act of compassion they have witnessed has revealed the Father's heart. Every word of teaching has been the Father speaking. Every miracle of healing has demonstrated the Father's desire to restore what sin has broken. As the evening progresses into night, Jesus continues preparing their hearts for what lies ahead. He speaks of the Holy Spirit, who will come to guide them into all truth, to remind them of everything He has taught them, to be their advocate and comforter when the world turns against them. The promise that they will not be left as orphans carries particular poignancy as they sense, without fully understanding, that some form of separation is approaching. "Peace I leave with you, my peace I give you. I do not give to you as the world gives. Do not let your hearts be troubled, and do not be afraid." This peace that Jesus offers is not the absence of difficulty, but the presence of unshakable trust in divine love, not the elimination of pain, but the assurance that no suffering can separate them from the one who will walk through every trial beside them. The final hymn they sing together echoes through the upper room like a benediction, voices raised in ancient melodies that have carried hope through generations of waiting, faith through seasons of suffering, love through times when love seemed powerless against the forces arrayed against it. The same songs that their ancestors sang in Egyptian slavery, that sustained their hearts through Babylonian exile, that voiced their longing for redemption through centuries of foreign domination. As they prepare to leave this sacred space, walking out into the night that will test every promise they have made, every declaration of loyalty they have voiced, Jesus looks at each face one final time. He sees Peter, who will deny knowing him before the rooster crows, but also the Peter who will become the rock on which the early church is built. He sees the other disciples who will scatter like sheep when their shepherd is struck, but also the apostles who will carry his gospel to the ends of the earth. Most of all, he sees past their coming failures to the grace that will restore them, past their present confusion to the clarity that resurrection will bring, past their temporary abandonment to the lifetime of faithful service that will mark their response to forgiveness freely given and abundantly received. In the garden where they go to pray, the weight of approaching sacrifice begins to press upon Jesus' human heart with intensity that brings sweat like drops of blood. This is not fear of physical pain, though the crucifixion will be excruciating, but the spiritual agony of perfect love preparing to bear the weight of all human sin, all separation from God, all the darkness that has ever clouded the relationship between Creator and creation. My Father, if it is possible, may this cup be taken from me. Yet not as I will, but as you will. This prayer reveals both the genuine humanity of Jesus, who feels the natural human aversion to suffering, and his perfect surrender to divine purpose that will accomplish what no amount of teaching or miracle working could achieve. Some forms of love can only be demonstrated through sacrifice. Some depths of commitment can only be proven through willingness to pay the ultimate price. The disciples, exhausted by the emotional intensity of the evening, fall asleep despite his request that they watch and pray with him. Their inability to stay awake during his hour of greatest need becomes symbol of how often human love fails at the moments when it's needed most. How good intentions prove insufficient when tested by real cost. How the spirit may be willing but the flesh remains weak. When torches appear through the trees and the sound of approaching footsteps breaks the silence of the garden, the time for preparation has ended. Judas leads the way, his betrayer's kiss identifying the one who has loved him faithfully despite knowing from the beginning what choice he would make. The arrest that follows sets in motion the final sequence of events that will reveal once and for all what divine love is willing to endure for the sake of those who desperately need redemption but have no way to earn or achieve it on their own. As your heart continues its peaceful rhythm, drawing you deeper into the rest that comes from dwelling in this sacred story, let yourself feel the weight of love that would go to such lengths to reach you, to heal you, to restore you to the relationship with God for which you were created. This is the love that will not be deterred by betrayal, discouraged by abandonment, or defeated by death itself. Chapter 13. The Cross and the Crown in the deepest quiet of your soul, where peace has become your natural dwelling place, and each breath carries you further into sacred rest. We approach the heart of all human history. The moment when divine love demonstrates its ultimate nature through the willing embrace of undeserved suffering. Feel yourself drawn to a hill outside Jerusalem's walls, where 3 crosses stand silhouetted against a sky that grows dark with more than approaching storm. The night has been long and brutal, filled with trials that mock justice, beatings that reveal the worst of human nature, accusations hurled by those who should recognize truth when it stands before them. Jesus has been shuttled between Pilate and Herod, between Roman authority that finds no fault in him and Jewish leadership that demands his death, between political expedience and divine purpose that will not be deterred even by the failure of earthly justice. Watch Pilate as he struggles with the decision that will define his place in history. This Roman governor, accustomed to exercising absolute authority over life and death, finds himself strangely powerless before the quiet dignity of the prisoner who stands before him. What is truth? He asks, not realizing that truth itself has taken human form and stands within his reach, offering salvation he cannot recognize because it comes in a form he does not expect. The crowd that demands crucifixion reveals how quickly public opinion can shift when manipulated by those who understand how to exploit fear and prejudice. Many of these same voices shouted "Hosanna" just days earlier, spreading palm branches before his feet and declaring him king. Now they cry, "Crucify him." With equal fervor, their fickleness a mirror of human nature's tendency to turn against what it cannot control or comprehend. Barabbas the criminal goes free while Jesus the innocent takes his place, the first of many substitutions that this day will represent. The guilty released while the guiltless suffers, the violent rewarded while the peaceful is punished, the rebellious pardoned while the obedient is condemned. This inversion of justice becomes prophetic picture of what the cross accomplishes, the innocent dying for the guilty, the pure taking on the corruption of the impure, love absorbing hatred until hatred has nothing left to feed upon. The crown of thorns pressed into his brow creates a mockery of earthly royalty while accidentally proclaiming heavenly truth. These are not jewels that adorn a king's head, but thorns that pierce divine flesh. Not symbols of honor, but instruments of torture. Not recognition of authority, but ridicule of claims the mockers cannot understand. Yet somehow this crown of suffering becomes more regal than any earthly diadem, this humiliation more glorious than any worldly triumph. Feel the weight of the cross as Jesus carries it through Jerusalem's narrow streets, the wood rough against his torn shoulders, each step requiring effort that his beaten body can barely provide. The Via Dolorosa becomes the way of sorrow not just for him, but for all who understand what they are witnessing. Perfect love allowing itself to be destroyed by the very ones it seeks to save. Simon of Cyrene, pressed into service to help carry the cross when Jesus' strength fails, becomes unwilling participant in the most significant moment in human history. His touch on this instrument of execution connects him forever to the sacrifice being offered, makes him partner in bearing the load that will purchase redemption for the world. Sometimes we are called to carry what we do not understand, to participate in purposes larger than our comprehension. The women who follow, weeping for Jesus as he makes his way to Golgotha, receive words that reveal his heart even in the midst of his own agony. Daughters of Jerusalem, do not weep for me. Weep for yourselves and for your children. Even facing death, his concern is not for his own suffering, but for the suffering that others will endure when they reject the salvation he is providing. On Calvary's hill, watch as the soldiers drive nails through hands that have blessed children, healed the sick, broken bread for the hungry. Listen as they pierce feet that have walked on water, climbed mountains to pray, carried good news to those who needed hope. Feel the earth shudder as the cross is raised, holding suspended between heaven and earth the one who is both, the bridge between divine and human that makes reconciliation possible. The inscription placed above his head reads, "Jesus of Nazareth, King of the Jews," in 3 languages. Pilate's final act of defiance against the religious leaders who demanded Jesus' death. Written in Hebrew, Latin, and Greek, it proclaims to representatives of every nation what they cannot yet understand. This is indeed their king, not just of Jews, but of all who will acknowledge his lordship, not ruling through force, but reigning through love that proves stronger than death. Between 2 thieves he hangs, numbered with transgressors as prophecy foretold, yet even here his true nature shines through the darkness. One criminal mocks him along with the crowd, challenging him to save himself if he truly has divine power. But the other recognizes something that religious leaders have missed, something that crowds have failed to grasp. This man has done nothing wrong. "Lord, Remember me when you come into your kingdom. The repentant thief pleads and receives immediate assurance that transforms execution into entrance to paradise. Today you will be with me in paradise. No elaborate ritual of repentance, no lengthy process of proving worthiness, no requirement to make amends for past wrongdoing. Simply honest recognition of need and humble request for mercy, met with grace that exceeds all expectation. The conversation between Jesus and his mother reveals the tender humanity that remains intact even in extremity of physical agony. "Woman, here is your son," he says to Mary, and to John, "Here is your mother." Even while bearing the sins of the world, he ensures that his earthly mother will be cared for, that human relationships will be honored even as divine purpose is fulfilled. My God, why have you forsaken me?" The cry that pierces the darkness is not despair, but quotation from Psalm 22, scripture that begins with abandonment, but ends with victory, that moves from lament to praise, from apparent defeat to ultimate triumph. Yet the sense of separation from the Father is real, the spiritual anguish of bearing sin, creating distance between divine persons that has never existed before and will never exist again. I am thirsty. The physical need speaks to genuine human suffering while fulfilling prophecy that reveals divine orchestration of these events. The sour wine offered on a sponge provides small comfort but great significance. Another detail that confirms this is not random tragedy but planned redemption. Not defeat of divine purpose, but its ultimate fulfillment. It is finished. 3 words that change everything, declaring not that life is ending, but that work is complete, that debt is paid, that separation between God and humanity has been bridged, that the way into the Holy of Holies has been opened for all who will enter through faith. The temple veil tears from top to bottom at this moment, symbolic of barriers removed, access granted, forgiveness made available to all who will receive it. Father, into your hands I commit my spirit. The final words demonstrate trust that remains unshaken despite the ordeal, confidence in divine love that persists through apparent abandonment, faith that death is not the end, but transition into greater life than earthly existence can contain. The darkness that covers the land for 3 hours speaks of creation mourning its creator's death, of light withdrawing in protest at what human blindness has accomplished, of heaven itself grieving the cost that love has chosen to pay. Yet this darkness will give way to light beyond any that earth has known. This death will produce life that conquers every grave. This apparent defeat will prove to be victory that nothing can overturn. As your breathing continues its peaceful rhythm, drawing you deeper into the sacred mystery of love that gives itself completely for those who cannot save themselves, let your heart rest in the assurance that this death was not in vain, that this sacrifice accomplished everything it was intended to achieve, that the cross has become not symbol of defeat, but declaration of victory over every force that would separate you from the love of God. Chapter 14. The promise fulfilled in the sacred silence that surrounds your complete rest, where peace flows through your spirit like a gentle river and every concern has been surrendered to divine love. Feel yourself being drawn toward the most glorious dawn in human history. The darkness of crucifixion has given way to something unprecedented, something that changes the meaning of every grave, every goodbye, every moment when hope seemed to die along with the one in whom it had been invested. The women who walk through Jerusalem's empty streets in the pre-dawn darkness carry spices prepared with loving care, their hearts heavy with grief, but their hands still moving in final acts of devotion to the one who had touched their lives with grace beyond measure. Mary Magdalene leads the way, her step sure despite the darkness, her purpose clear despite the pain that has settled over her spirit like a heavy cloak. They had watched from a distance as his body was taken down from the cross, had seen Joseph of Arimathea and Nicodemus wrap it in fine linen with precious spices, had observed the stone rolled across the entrance to the garden tomb. The Sabbath had prevented them from completing the burial preparations, leaving them with one final task of love to perform. One last opportunity to honor the one who had shown them what it meant to be truly valued, genuinely loved, completely accepted. But as they approach the tomb in the gray light of early morning, something is wrong. The massive stone that required several men to move, that had been sealed with Roman authority and guarded by soldiers whose lives depended on maintaining security, lies rolled away from the entrance like a discarded blanket. The tomb that should contain the body of their beloved teacher stands open, empty, transformed from place of ending into birthplace of beginning. Feel Mary's confusion as she runs back to tell Peter and John, her words tumbling over each other in excitement that she cannot yet interpret. They have taken the Lord out of the tomb, and we don't know where they have put him. Her first thought is not resurrection, but robbery, not miracle, but misfortune, not victory, but violation of the sacred space where love had laid her Savior to rest. Peter and John race through the streets, their sandals slapping against stones worn smooth by centuries of pilgrims, their hearts pounding with more than physical exertion. What they find in the tomb defies explanation while demanding faith. The grave clothes lie undisturbed, still holding the shape of the body they had wrapped, but empty now as if their contents had simply passed through them without disturbing their careful arrangement. John looks at this evidence and believes, though he doesn't yet understand what resurrection means or how it can be possible. Peter stares in amazement, his practical mind struggling to process what his eyes are seeing, his heart beginning to hope for something too wonderful to be trusted, too good to be true, yet too real to be denied. But it is Mary, returning to the tomb after the disciples have gone home, who receives the first direct encounter with the risen Christ. Through tears that blur her vision and grief that clouds her thinking, she sees what she takes to be the gardener, someone who might know what has happened to the body she seeks to honor with proper burial. "Sir, if you have carried him away, tell me where you have put him, and I will get him," she pleads, love making her bold enough to approach a stranger, determined to reclaim what death has taken from her. And then he speaks her name with a voice she has heard call her out of darkness into light, out of bondage into freedom, out of despair into hope. Mary. In that single word, everything changes. The gardener becomes the master, the stranger becomes the Savior, the dead becomes the living Lord, who stands before her with wounds that prove his identity and life that proves his victory. "Rabboni," she cries, using the Aramaic term of deepest respect and affection, reaching toward him with hands that want to hold on to this moment forever, to prevent another separation, to ensure that this reunion is permanent. "Do not hold on to me," Jesus says gently, "for I have not yet returned to the Father. Go instead to my brothers and tell them, I am returning to my Father and your Father, to my God and your God." The relationship that his death and resurrection has made possible is revealed in these words. The disciples are no longer servants but brothers, no longer followers but family members who share his Father as their Father, his God as their God. That evening, as darkness falls over Jerusalem and doors are locked for fear of religious authorities, who might seek to eliminate the witnesses to resurrection, Jesus appears among his gathered disciples, despite walls and bolts that should prevent entry. "Peace be with you," he says, and shows them his hands inside, wounds that have become proofs of identity, scars that testify to love's willingness to suffer for those it seeks to save. The joy that fills that upper room is beyond description, beyond containment, beyond anything they had imagined possible when they watched him die on Calvary's Hill. This is not just relief that their friend has returned, but recognition that everything he taught them about the kingdom of heaven, about divine love, about his own identity and mission, has been vindicated by power that proves stronger than death itself. Thomas, absent from this first appearance, struggles with second-hand reports of resurrection. "Unless I see the nail marks in his hands, and put my finger where the nails were, and put my hand into his side, I will not believe it." His skepticism is not weakness but honesty, not lack of faith but intellectual integrity that refuses to accept what seems impossible without convincing evidence. A week later, Jesus appears again to the gathered disciples, addressing Thomas's doubts with invitation rather than rebuke. "Put your finger here. See my hands. Reach out your hand and put it into my side. Stop doubting and believe." Thomas's response becomes one of the most profound confessions of faith in all Scripture. "My Lord and my God." Recognition that resurrection proves not just survival of death, but divine identity. Not just return to life, but revelation of who Jesus truly is. On the shore of Galilee, Jesus prepares breakfast for disciples who have returned to fishing, perhaps uncertain what their future holds now that their teacher has risen from the dead. The charcoal fire, the fish cooking over flames, the bread ready to be shared, all create atmosphere of normalcy that frames the extraordinary reality of dining with the risen Lord. Peter's threefold declaration of love, matching his threefold denial during the crucifixion, restores him to the leadership role that his failure had seemed to forfeit. "Feed my lambs," Jesus tells him. "Take care of my sheep." The work of the kingdom will continue through human hands and hearts, carried forward by those who have been transformed by encounter with resurrection life. The appearances continue over 40 days, to individuals and groups, in closed rooms and open spaces, at meals and on journeys. Each encounter adding testimony to the reality that death has been defeated, that love has proven stronger than every force arrayed against it, that the promise of eternal life is not wishful thinking, but accomplished fact. As your heart rests in the deep peace of this sacred story, let the reality of resurrection settle into every corner of your being. The same power that raised Jesus from the dead is available to bring new life to every area of your existence that feels dead or dying. The love that conquered death offers victory over every form of defeat in your own experience. The hope that dawn brought to that first Easter morning is your hope as well. Promise that no ending is final when divine love is involved. This is the promise fulfilled, the victory won, the love demonstrated beyond all doubt or question. In the gentle darkness of your rest tonight, you are held by the one who died and rose again, who lives forever to intercede for those he loves, who has prepared a place where all who trust in him will dwell in peace that knows no ending. Chapter 15. Until we meet again in peace, as the sacred journey of this night draws toward its gentle close, your spirit has found that deep place of rest where earthly concerns fade into insignificance, beside the eternal realities we have explored together. Each breath comes now as a gift of grace, each heartbeat a reminder that you are held by love that conquered death itself, each moment of peace a foretaste of the eternal rest that awaits all who have placed their trust in the one whose story we have shared. Feel yourself standing now with the disciples on the Mount of Olives, where Jesus prepares to return to the Father who sent him, where the earthly ministry that began with baptism in the Jordan concludes with ascension into clouds of glory. The commission he leaves with them becomes his commission to all who would follow. Go and make disciples of all nations, baptizing them in the name of the Father and of the Son and of the Holy Spirit, and teaching them to obey everything I have commanded you. But even more precious than the command is the promise that accompanies it. And surely I am with you always, to the very end of the age. This is not goodbye, but transformation of presence. Not absence, but a different kind of availability. Not loss, but expansion of relationship beyond the limitations of physical proximity. The same Jesus who walked dusty roads in Palestine walks beside you on the paths of your daily life, as near as prayer, as close as faith, as available as the breath that fills your lungs. As we complete this sacred telling, I find my heart overflowing with gratitude for the privilege of sharing these hours with you, for the blessing of walking together through the most beautiful story ever told, for the community of seekers that has gathered around these ancient truths that remain as fresh and life-giving as morning dew. Your presence here has enriched my own understanding. Your seeking has encouraged my own faith. Your willingness to invest this time in eternal matters has reminded me of what truly deserves our attention and devotion. To those who have joined us for the first time tonight, welcome to a family of fellow travelers who have discovered that the deepest rest comes not from empty minds, but from hearts filled with divine love. Not from escape from reality, but from encounter with reality itself in the person of Jesus Christ. Your searching has led you to exactly the right place, for this story is not merely historical account, but personal invitation. Not just religious information, but transformational encounter with love that changes everything it touches. If these hours have brought peace to your restless spirit, if the Jesus we have met together has begun to heal wounds you carry, if hope has been kindled in places where despair had taken residence, then I invite you to continue this journey with us. By subscribing to our channel, you become part of a community committed to creating regular spaces for this kind of soul-nourishing rest, for encounters with sacred stories that speak to the deepest needs of human hearts, for the gentle ministry of helping weary souls find their way home to the peace that passes understanding. Your subscription does more than provide you with notifications of new content. It helps us build a sanctuary in the digital wilderness, a refuge where people can escape the relentless pace of modern life to remember what matters most. Each time you choose to return to these sacred spaces we create together, you're making a statement about your values, declaring that spiritual health is as important as physical health, that soul care deserves the same attention we give to body care. Consider, too, sharing your own reflections in the comments below, the ways this story has touched your heart tonight, the particular aspects of Jesus' ministry that speak most directly to your current circumstances. There is profound encouragement that comes from reading how others are finding hope and healing in the same truths that are ministering to your own spirit. Your words might be exactly what another seeker needs to hear, the confirmation that their longing is valid, their search is worthwhile, their journey toward peace is shared by others who understand. Sometimes the questions you bring become gifts to the entire community, opening conversations that lead to deeper understanding for all of us. Sometimes the victories you share inspire others who are struggling with similar challenges. Sometimes the struggles you're willing to admit help others feel less alone in their own difficulties. None of us has all the answers, but together we carry pieces of wisdom that, when shared openly and lovingly, create a more complete picture of how divine love works in human lives. If there are other sacred stories you would like to explore together, other aspects of spiritual life that hunger for attention, other ways that ancient truths can speak to contemporary hearts, please let us know in the comments. This ministry exists to serve your deepest needs, to create content that truly nourishes souls rather than merely entertaining minds. Your feedback helps us understand how to be most helpful, how to create the kinds of experiences that genuinely contribute to your spiritual well-being. Perhaps you would enjoy walking through the parables of Jesus, those simple stories that carry profound truths about the kingdom of heaven. Maybe you're drawn to the Psalms, those honest prayers that give voice to every human emotion while anchoring hearts in faith. Or you might find rest in exploring the lives of biblical characters who struggled with challenges similar to your own, who found God's faithfulness sufficient for every trial they faced. Whatever direction your seeking takes, know that you are welcome here, that your questions are valued, that your presence adds richness to our shared exploration of divine love. This is not a community of those who have arrived, but of those who are traveling, not of perfect people, but of honest seekers, not of those who have all the answers, but of those who are willing to keep asking the questions that matter most. As you prepare now for the deepest rest, let every muscle in your body release its tension, surrendering to the support of whatever holds you. Feel your breathing slow to its most natural rhythm, each exhale a small prayer of gratitude, each inhale a gentle receiving of divine love. Your mind can rest from its endless analyzing and planning, trusting that the one who never sleeps nor slumbers is watching over you with care that exceeds any human protection. Let your heart settle into the assurance that you are known completely and loved, unconditionally by the one whose story we have shared tonight. Every mistake you've made has been covered by His grace. Every wound you carry has been touched by His healing. Every fear that whispers in the darkness has been answered by His promise to never leave you nor forsake you. You are safe in the arms of eternal love, held by hands that bear scars of sacrifice, offered freely for your sake. The angels that announced His birth continue to watch over His children. The same Spirit that raised Him from the dead lives within all who have received Him as Savior and Lord. The Father who sent His Son into the world holds you tonight with the same love that moved Him to give His most precious gift for your redemption. You are not alone, not abandoned, not forgotten in the vast universe, but cherished as if you were His only child, pursued by love that will not give up until it has brought you safely home. May your dreams tonight be filled with glimpses of the glory that awaits, visions of the peace that has no ending, scenes of the reunion that will make every earthly separation seem brief and temporary. May you wake tomorrow with renewed strength for whatever challenges arise, with deeper confidence in the love that carries you through all difficulties, with clearer sense of your identity as a beloved child of the Most High. Until we meet again in these sacred spaces we create together, until we gather once more around stories that nourish souls and truths that transform hearts, may the peace of Christ that surpasses all understanding guard your heart and mind. May His love be your constant companion, His presence your unfailing comfort, His promises your unshakable foundation. Sleep now in the arms of the One who loves you most. Rest in the assurance that all is well, because He makes all things work together for good for those who love Him. Dream sweetly of the love that will never let you go, and wake refreshed by grace that is new every morning, mercy that never fails to meet you exactly where you are, with exactly what you need. In the name of Jesus, who died and rose again, that you might live forever in His love, I bless you with the deepest peace your heart has ever known. Until we meet again, may you be still and know that He is God. May you rest in the shelter of His wings. May you dwell forever in the house of the Lord, where your place at the table has been prepared from before the foundation of the world. Amen, and the sweetest of dreams to you, beloved fellow seeker of the peace that only Jesus can provide.